One day, I'm just a girl, standing in front of a boy, asking him to love her. One unforgettable sentence turned Notting Hill into one of the most iconic romantic films ever made. Released in 1999, that moment became more than movie dialogue, it became a cultural phenomenon. Couples quoted it, audiences memorized it, and for millions of people, it perfectly captured the terrifying vulnerability of asking someone to love you back. On screen, Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant looked completely effortless together, convincing the world they shared the same chemistry when the camera stopped rolling. But behind the smiles, the reality was far more complicated. Years of interviews, offhand remarks, and long-forgotten comments have slowly painted a very different picture of what actually happened between Hollywood's biggest leading lady and Britain's favorite romantic hero. Now, decades later, with Julia Roberts reflecting more openly on different stages of her career, the story surrounding Notting Hill is being viewed through an entirely new lens. To understand why that chapter still attracts so much attention, you have to go back long before Julia Roberts became America's sweetheart. Born Julia Fiona Roberts on October 28, 1967, in Smyrna, Georgia, she grew up in a household where creativity wasn't a hobby, it was a way of life. Her parents, Walter and Betty Roberts, were actors, playwrights, and founders of the Atlanta Actors and Writers Workshop. They also operated a children's acting school that welcomed students regardless of race during a deeply divided period in American history. Martin Luther King Jr.'s children attended that school, and as a gesture of appreciation, Coretta Scott King helped pay the hospital bill when Julia was born. It was an extraordinary beginning, but her childhood soon became marked by heartbreak. Her parents divorced when she was only 4 years old, and at 9, she lost her father to throat cancer. Roberts has rarely spoken about that loss in dramatic terms, but whenever she has, the emotion has been unmistakable. She once admitted that losing him so young was something she simply learned to carry for the rest of her life. After graduating from Campbell High School in 1985, Roberts moved to New York City hoping to build a career in entertainment. There was no overnight success waiting for her. Modeling agencies showed little interest, auditions came and went, and acting classes became her daily routine. She wasn't viewed as Hollywood's next superstar, just another ambitious young woman chasing an unlikely dream. That began to change with Mystic Pizza in 1988, where her natural screen presence caught the industry's attention. But it was Steel Magnolias the following year that transformed everything. Writer Robert Harling later recalled that the moment Julia entered the audition room, her smile instantly convinced him she was perfect for the role. Despite enduring a difficult filming experience under director Herbert Ross, she delivered a performance that earned her first Academy Award nomination and Golden Globe victory. Almost overnight, Hollywood realized it had discovered its next leading actress. Then came the opportunity that would redefine her career forever. After several established actresses declined the role, the script for Pretty Woman finally landed in Julia Roberts' hands, a decision that would change both her life and the history of romantic comedies. By the time the role finally reached Julia Roberts, several well-known actresses had already turned it down. Jennifer Jason Leigh, Karen Allen, Daryl Hannah, Michelle Pfeiffer, Molly Ringwald, Meg Ryan, each had the chance to become Vivian Ward. But the moment Julia stepped in front of the camera, every other possibility disappeared. She didn't just play the character, she redefined what a romantic comedy heroine could be. Paid just $300,000 for the role, Roberts watched Pretty Woman explode into a global phenomenon, earning more than $463 million worldwide and becoming one of the highest-grossing romantic comedies in history. At only 22 years old, she was suddenly the biggest female movie star on the planet. But while the world celebrated the fairy tale, Julia was about to discover that overnight fame often comes with consequences no one warns you about. The years that followed were anything but easy. In 1991, her highly publicized engagement to Kiefer Sutherland collapsed just days before the wedding, turning a deeply personal heartbreak into front-page entertainment. 2 years later, she married country singer Lyle Lovett, but the relationship ended after less than 2 years. Every decision she made, every relationship she entered, and every career move she considered became material for headlines. At the same time, her film career became increasingly unpredictable. Movies like Sleeping with the Enemy and The Pelican Brief proved she could dominate the box office, while riskier projects such as Mary Riley divided critics and audiences.
The hair's gonna grow
Rather
now
than repeating
through
the
that
same
walk.
glamorous roles that had made her famous, Roberts deliberately chased more challenging characters, even when they threatened her carefully crafted image. Hollywood wanted the smiling superstar. Julia wanted to become a serious actress. Those two ambitions didn't always point in the same direction. Behind the famous smile was someone carrying years of personal loss and enormous public pressure. She had experienced heartbreak long before fame arrived, and now every success and failure unfolded under a microscope. Yet just when critics began questioning whether her golden era had passed, she delivered another unforgettable performance. My Best Friend's Wedding in 1997 reminded audiences why she had become one of Hollywood's most magnetic stars. Instead of playing the obvious romantic lead, Roberts embraced a far more complicated role, a woman forced to watch the love of her life choose someone else. The film earned nearly $300 million worldwide and firmly re-established her as one of the industry's most bankable actresses. Then came Notting Hill. Written by Richard Curtis and directed by Roger Michell, the film carried a deceptively simple idea: what happens when the most famous actress in the world falls for an ordinary man who owns a tiny travel bookstore in London? It wasn't difficult to see where fiction ended and reality began. Julia Roberts was effectively playing a heightened version of herself, while Hugh Grant took on the role of the charming but awkward bookseller, William Thacker. Roberts later admitted she accepted the project without expecting it to become a defining chapter of her career. To her, it looked like a solid script, an experienced director, and another promising role. What she couldn't have predicted was that the relationship between the film's two stars would eventually attract almost as much attention as the movie itself. At the time, Hugh Grant was already Britain's undisputed king of romantic comedies following the enormous success of 4 Weddings and a Funeral. His nervous charm and self-deprecating humor made him the perfect choice for William Thacker. But behind the scenes, things weren't always as effortless as they appeared on screen. Over the years, Grant openly admitted making jokes about Julia Roberts' appearance, particularly her famously wide smile. In later interviews, he also made comparisons between kissing scenes with different actresses, comments that many viewers felt were unnecessary and insensitive. Julia Roberts never publicly fired back or attempted to escalate the situation. For decades, she chose silence instead. That decision only fueled curiosity, leaving fans to wonder whether the real story behind Notting Hill had been hidden in plain sight all along. As the promotional tour for Notting Hill unfolded in 1999, Hugh Grant made a remark that, in hindsight, revealed more than he may have intended. He explained that it was surprisingly easy to forget the woman sitting beside him was the same Julia Roberts who, for years, had been one of the most inaccessible celebrities on Earth. To him, she seemed relaxed, approachable, and down-to-earth in person, yet at the same time she carried the overwhelming presence of a global icon whose image had been reproduced millions of times across magazines, television, and billboards. It wasn't simply a matter of working with a famous actress. It was the strange experience of separating the real person from the myth the world had built around her. That contrast became one of the invisible stories surrounding the film, even though audiences never saw it. For Julia Roberts, the role itself blurred that same line between fiction and reality. In Notting Hill, she portrayed Anna Scott, a superstar whose every movement is followed by cameras, whose personal life belongs to strangers, and who longs for something impossibly ordinary, a life where she can simply love someone without headlines getting in the way. The character wasn't an exact copy of Roberts, but the parallels were impossible to ignore. By 1999, she had spent nearly a decade living under relentless public attention, making Anna Scott's loneliness feel remarkably authentic. That famous confession, "I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy asking him to love her," resonated because audiences believed every word. It wasn't just convincing acting, it reflected emotions that Roberts herself had experienced while trying to balance global fame with an increasingly private personal life. Behind the scenes, however, the production wasn't completely free of tension. Reports from the period suggested Roberts renegotiated her salary during production, eventually earning around $15 million, a figure that drew attention throughout Hollywood. At the same time, Hugh Grant later admitted to making several comments about Roberts that many fans considered unnecessarily blunt, reinforcing the impression that the two stars never developed a close friendship away from the cameras. Yet something remarkable happened whenever filming began. Whatever differences existed off-screen simply disappeared in front of the lens. Richard Curtis's script, Roger Michel's direction, and the performances of both actors combined to create one of the most beloved romantic pairings of the era. Notting Hill went on to earn nearly $364 million worldwide, becoming one of the biggest British film successes of 1999 and cementing its place as a romantic comedy classic. But for Julia Roberts, Notting Hill wasn't the defining achievement of her career, it was merely the bridge to something even greater. The following year, she accepted the lead role in Erin Brockovich, portraying the real-life legal clerk who helped expose one of the largest environmental contamination scandals in America. Complicated because she was portraying a woman desperate to be seen as ordinary while personally living through the exact opposite reality. Looking back, she has suggested that the film's most famous line carried a deeper meaning than audiences realized at the time. It reflected a feeling she genuinely understood, the desire to be recognized not as an icon, but simply as another person hoping to be loved. As for Grant, Roberts has made it clear that whenever they've crossed paths over the years, their interactions have been perfectly cordial. There was never a public feud to resolve, nor a lifelong friendship to perform for cameras. Just two professionals whose personalities never completely aligned but who still created something audiences would treasure for generations. That may be the real legacy of Notting Hill. The magic people fell in love with wasn't built on a fairy tale friendship behind the scenes. It was created by two talented actors bringing honesty to characters who longed for connection in very different ways. Sometimes the stories that endure aren't perfect because the people making them were perfect, they endure because they captured emotions that feel universally true. Decades later, audiences still remember that unforgettable confession, not because it belonged to Julia Roberts or Hugh Grant, but because it eventually belonged to everyone who ever struggled to say those words themselves. And perhaps that's the most fascinating question of all: can the most authentic performances come from actors carrying emotions they never intended to reveal? If you think the answer is yes, or if you see Notting Hill differently after hearing the story behind it, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed uncovering the real stories behind Hollywood's biggest legends, don't forget to subscribe, because the next one may change the way you see another classic forever.